excited to introduce you Peter Crowhurst, who's going to talk to us about the importance of plaques to understanding our history. I'm just really excited about the whole idea of visual representation and how we mark buildings. It's going to be a fascinating talk. So very, very grateful for you coming today to talk to us. And yeah, thank you very much indeed.
And good afternoon, everyone. Just to give you some background to who I am. I taught in West Sussex, Hove, New Zealand for about 30 years teaching history, during which time I was also chair of the NLCA, and you've seen a lot, or you will see a lot about the NLCA and its history as you go around the festival today. Since retirement, about quite a few years ago now, I have focused on giving guided walks around Brighton, Hove and Lewis, and also on the South Downs. And also at the moment I am the archivist for the commemorative plaque panel in Brighton, hence the background to much of this talk. 60 years ago I began a course of A-level history in a school very much like this, a boys' grammar school in Winchester. And history then consisted of, it was just political history. I think my course was 19th century English and European history, which was much the same as every other course in every boys' and girls' grammar school around the country. In 1973, when I started teaching in Hove, I taught economic and social history. And I think there was a feeling then, possibly, it certainly doesn't exist now, but that economic and social history was the poor man's history. And secondary modern boys could not do real political history, which was the study of monarchs, prime ministers, wars, etc. Nowadays things are totally different. We have numerous subdivisions of history. We have local history, we have women's history, we have Asian history, Indian history, local history, oral history, all of them contributing in their own way to our understanding of the past. And many other forms of history as well. I mean, that with it brings huge issues about the nature of history and how we teach it, but certainly local history and oral history and women's history are as important as political history, based as it was on a study of government documents and little else. And also based on the idea that studying history meant trying to understand and get to the facts. And there was an idea, certainly which was prevalent in the 1960s, that there was a fact that you could reach. Nowadays, we have no such ideas. History is about the interpretation of the past, and interpretations of the past differ. Use of evidence differs, so things have changed a great deal for the better. Of all the subdivisions of history, for me, local history and community history is the most important of all. Seems odd to say that when the focus in history is largely on big tomes, describing foreign policies and the events of governments. But for me, local history is as important, if not more important, than all of those. Studying local history can foster a sense of pride amongst people and amongst a community, and can bring a community together. And as you go around, you will see lots of information about the North Lane Community Association. 50 years anniversary, and the thread which goes through that history, which goes through the story of the North Lane, is its history. So, for example, I was on teams which produced this booklet, The Story of North Lane. We had a team of over a dozen to start with, so instantly you're bringing people in to finding out about the story of the past, largely based on oral testimony, so you're involving older people, and you're making older people feel valued. And the same with these leaflets here, produced by teams, and once you produce that history with teams, you have a shared history, which you can all buy into. A new residents moving into an area, the first thing quite often they want to know is about the past. They want to know the history of their house, they want to know the history of the area. And North Lane history is very much part of the identity of living in North Lane. So that's one reason why I think it's important. Another reason is you can start with a study of local history, and you can move on to, that can take you with a broader approach into looking at national history as well. So it's a good starting point, as I'll show you hopefully in a minute. It's accessible. Anyone of any age with just a sense of curiosity can start with their street, their house, and discover who lived there, who lived in the street, who these people are famous for, and that can lead you into all sorts of directions, and you're not constrained by a study in any one particular area. Local history is about stories of ordinary people. I've also, as part of involvement in local history, I was part of Queen's Park Books for a time. I think Queen's Park's books are about the best local history books you can find in the country, based on oral history. I did an oral history course at the university when they were putting on courses for adulthood, and the department there was about the best in the country. I did a local history course with Jeff. Jeff was my mentor. So local history is really, really important. So it is accessible, it's all around us. Image of a North Lane in 1850, and just walking around you will find all sorts of clues to the story of North Lane. So let's just take a little part of the town and to see what it throws up. Jubilee Street there on the left. Names are always a good clue into the story of the past. So why is it called Jubilee Street? Yes, it was a jubilee. It was a jubilee held in 1809, October 1809, when the monarchy was in a fairly parlous state. It was desperate to try and restore its reputation, as was its followers. And in October 1809 were held the first Jubilee celebrations in our history, all over the country. And in Jubilee Street in Brighton, it was just at that point in 1809, just a few houses. There was a street party provided by local landowners to celebrate the monarchy, which in 1809 was 50 years old, George III, 1860 to 1810. They were celebrating it in October, just prior to 1810. And the monarchy was in a parlous state. And here you can get to compare then and now. 1809, the king was going senile, incapable of government, or playing his role in government. The Prince of Wales and his wife were separated and had been for some time. That had caused scandal and ridicule. And then in addition, the Duke of York, second son of the monarch, was involved in a sex scandal. This goes round and round and round. He was involved with a printer's daughter, and this had come to light when a previous lover of her name was Mary Clark, and she was a printer's daughter. She had had numerous affairs with the political elite, and someone divulged this, and it came to Parliament. Parliament condemned the Duke of York for being naive. And eventually he had to buy the silence of Mary Clark, and he paid £7,000 to do that, and then she negotiated a pension for life. What the Duke of York didn't know was that, being a printer's daughter, she was in a position to print off all the letters which the Duke of York had sent her, which she kept. And the monarchy was mining controversy, and here, if you wish, you could, conduct a comparison between then and now. How is the monarchy today as compared to that? So that's the origin of Jubilee Street. That's the origin of the name, the first ever Jubilee held to try and resurrect the reputation of the monarchy. Also interesting in this picture is the wagon horses, built in 1848 as a gymnasium for the son of an immigrant, Frederick Mohammed. A remainder gymnasium for 4 years, and then became the wagon and horses. And then if you look at the 1830 image, which we have of Jubilee Street is just here, we have the finest example of Regency Gothic in Brighton, the National School, which was demolished shamefully in 1971, and that teaches us about the need for local people really to keep an eye on their area, because you can't trust the council to do so. And that's, I think, a lesson in history. So, Jubilee Street. Go down the road, just down Church Road, and you come to this statue here, Queen Victoria. And again, why is it there? We just accept it's there. But it was there. It was unveiled in June the 22nd, 1897, when all over the country similar statues were being unveiled, or memorials. It was Victoria's 60th anniversary, and it came at a time when the country was losing its economic, political and military dominance due to the rise of America, Germany, France and Italy. And there was a need to make the nation feel proud again. The Navy needed rebuilding, the Army needed rebuilding, etc. And people needed to feel a sense of togetherness against this foreign threat. And again, the Jubilee celebrations were about just that. This was unveiled on June the 22nd, 1897. The Wych Elm in Pavilion Gardens also unveiled that day, I would suggest for the same reasons. The Hove statue was also unveiled for the same reasons, but they were a little bit late. That was unveiled in June 1897. The Hove statue, again to celebrate the Jubilee, wasn't unveiled in 1901, after Victoria died. So the celebrations were quite muted. And then down to the Valley Gardens, and you have a memorial here. And if you want to know why Britain was involved in the Middle East, in the way it has been for a number of years, you could do worse than starting with this memorial. There are two memorials, and they are both to the Egyptian campaigns of 1882 and 1884, in which the Royal Sussex Regiment took a major part. The 1882 campaign led to Egypt being controlled by Britain and remained so until 1956. The 1884 expedition was to rescue General Gordon. And it's one of the early memorials which has names on them. We get, after the First World War, numerous memorials with names, but that really started in the Crimean War. And this is one of the early memorials that have the names of the dead, the ordinary dead, not just the generals. So that's that one. The man on the far right is General Garnet Wolseley, who was the first person to receive the freedom of the borough of Brighton in 1898. He was the most famous and popular soldier of the 19th century. His papers are in Hope Library. He used to write frequently to his wife, 2 or 3 times a week. He would also tell her things that he would not tell his generals about his campaigning, and they're all in Hope Library, hidden away in cabinets, written on toilet paper, effectively. Yeah, so just by starting with a few little things around town, you can go off in different directions and explore. But my focus is on plaques in Brighton and Hove. I think plaques, particularly in Brighton and Hove, are the most important way in which we can discover our past. If you go to Lewis Information Office, there is one in Lewis, there isn't one in Brighton, you'll find you'll find perhaps a half a dozen, 12 guided tours around town. Brighton doesn't go in for that. Brighton doesn't go in for information boards. We're left to discover our heritage ourselves. And I think plaques are can be a good starting point and the best way of discovering our past. Let's there's a selection of plaques which you'll find around Brighton and Hove, starting with the oldest and finishing with the newest. And you'll see there is a variety of colours, a variety of designs, and apart from one, a variety of institutions which are responsible for them. So going through very quickly, without worrying too much about the text. Top left, we've got William Ainsworth. It's the oldest plaque in Brighton and Hove in Aradon Terrace. 1910 is a private plaque, which means that the corporations or the councils were not responsible in any way for it. Anyone can put a plaque on their house. You don't need permission unless it's a listed property. And that's just what that one is. It's a private person erecting a plaque to William Ainsworth, who was a novelist. And the plaque consists of listing all the novels which he wrote. 1910. The first plaque in which Brighton Corporation was involved was 1925, which was the plaque to Rowland Hill, which is in Hanover Crescent. And the Brighton Corporation contributed some of the money towards the payment for that plaque, which was initiated by the Rotary group in Brighton. So that's 1925. By 1925, a plaque subcommittee had been formed by Brighton Corporation to look into the possibility of using plaques to advertise. At that point, it would mainly advertise houses, which were important, not focusing on the person but on the house. Aubrey Beardsley, 1927. This is an Eric Gill plaque, which was commissioned by Brighton Corporation, and there were about 10 of these plaques between 1925 and 1931. Elizabeth Allen, that's a Hove Corporation plaque, 1996. Charles Parnell, 1986, again a Hove Corporation plaque. Eleanor Marks, Brighton Corporation, slate. The previous one, in fact, was aluminium, so the materials vary. Margaret Bonfield, a plaque commissioned by the City of Brighton and Hove, and the current panel, which has existed since 2006, and the latest plaque to the Short Brothers, erected last summer in 2025. So you've got a variety of colours. Nowadays, the plaque commissioned by Brighton and Hove has been standardised to a circular plaque, blue, ceramic, up to 450 millimetres wide, and if it's an event that's being commemorated, then a rectangular plaque, either portrait or landscape, and simply ceramic, blue ceramic. The others are, the Ainsworth plaque is bronze, Rowland Hill is stone, the Beardsley is stone, Elizabeth Allen is ceramic, Parnell is aluminium, Eleanor Marks is slate, doesn't weather very well at all, and Bonfield and Short are both blue ceramic. 161 plaques in Brighton and Hove, and you can see they're largely in the city centre. And there's a huge imbalance, whichever way you look at the plaques that there are in Brighton and Hove. There are inequalities wherever you look. So, for example, you're only about 40 in Hove. So the majority are in Brighton and Hove, the majority in the centre. There is one out at Northcombe. There are 3 or 4 in Rottingdean, but apart from that, they're in the city centre. 161. There are very few plaques of the working class, possibly less than half a dozen. There are just 36 plaques for women. And of those 36, 11 have been erected in the last 10 years. So before, say, 2015, there was a paltry percentage of plaques for women. So, yeah, 161 plaques. Normally about 3 or 4 are erected a year. So there we are with plaques in Brighton and Hove. So let's go through the plaques which are linked to the grammar school. The grammar school started in Grand Parade, 47 Grand Parade, as the Brighton Grammar and Preparatory School in 1859, in that building. The building stands out. If you look at most of Grand Parade, most of it is Regency, a lot of it is Avon Henry Wilds. This one stands out as sort of almost Italianate in design. We think it was designed by Charles Barry. I'm not sure. We think it was designed by Charles Barry, and there's a blue plaque of Charles Barry, which is in Waterloo Street, which is where his chapel was built, St Andrews in Waterloo Street. He was also responsible for building the Royal Sussex, the Barry Building, which is now no more. Also responsible for St Peter's Church in the late 1820s, and obviously the House of Parliament. So that's Charles Barry designing, we think, the first building of the grammar school. And then in 1868, the grammar school moves up the road to the site in Buckingham Road, and these 2 images are of that site. The one on the left, soon after the school moved. The site is no more. And in Buckingham Road, there are 2 plaques which are linked to the school. On the left hand, and they were both unveiled on the same day, on the 21st of November 1927. So on the left we have a plaque to Aubrey Beardsley, and the text says, Master of Line, was born in this house on August 21st, 1872. He was a pupil at the Brighton Grammar School, 1884-1888, and died at Mentone on March the 18th, 1898. Mentone is also where Diana Wolseley died, so obviously where people retired too. Unveiled 21st of November 1927. It's a gilt plaque. And on the right, on the other side of the road, is this plaque to E.J. Marshall, who was an early headmaster. In this building, E.J. Marshall, headmaster of the Brighton Grammar School from 1861 to 1899, carried on the last 31 years of his work. So he became headmaster in the last years of the Grand Parade School, and then moved up as headmaster to the new school in Buckingham Road, where he was headmaster to 1889. And so those 2 plaques, very close to the school and linked together. Let's go through a number of plaques in a little bit more detail. This one to Kent Hines, and this is a perfect example of a plaque to a local person, and a person who has made a significant contribution to local life. He was Director of Planning in Brighton, became Head of Planning in 1975, at a time when the North Lane was threatened with demolition. Dozens of buildings had already been demolished. The Wilson plan to demolish another 130 had just been rejected by the council. North Lane was in a parlous state. There were streets like Upper Gardner Street, where there were perhaps half a dozen houses empty, with trees going through. And Ken became chief planning officer in 1975, and instantly he began to work with the local community, and he had a different vision from previous planning officers. He recognised that in North Lane there was significant left of the old Victorian townscape, industrial and residential townscape, to warrant its being conserved and protected, and he announced that it would become part of a conservation area. And when it came to naming that area, the term North Lane had gone into abeyance in the mid-19th century, and he suggested to the Community Association that the new conservation area be called North Lane. It had, the Community Association had been called the North Road Runner initially, the magazine. And he worked with the local association, local residents association, in a way that just does not happen today. He attended meetings, there was correspondence between him and the residents, and they came to a view that, yes, let's name this area North Lane. So we have North Lane today, largely due to Ken. And as the plaque says, saved and named the North Lane Conservation Area. It's one of Infinity Foods, but unfortunately it's so high, you can't see it, you can't read the text. And he's an olive. It was yesterday, in fact 50 years ago, that she opened her shop in Kensington Gardens, 27th of March 1976, at which time there were very few new retailers in the area. Retailers were reluctant to move into North Lane because the future was not known. And she took out a loan, she employed a herbalist, she found a shop, named it the Body Shop, which did not meet with the approval of a number of the traders who were, in fact, ran funeral parlours. There were 3 funeral parlours. And when then she came along and named her shop the Body Shop, well, perhaps that's why she named it the Body Shop. I don't know. They were displeased. Anyway, as we know, it was the beginning of what became a global empire, and she showed what could be done and attracted other entrepreneurs to come into North Lane and to establish businesses. And in those early days of North Lane, there was very strong partnership, connection between the traders and the residents, and quite often the traders were in fact chair of the Community Association. That link is no more, unfortunately. Very few of the traders of North Lane today are local people, and more likely to be part of a multi-chain business. So Anita Rollick started her global empire in Kensington Gardens, and that's the plaque which is on the wall of Specs. One of the major issues of the time is, nowadays in this country, is migration. And yet I think that as a nation we know very little about migration. We're fairly ignorant on migration. And if I was writing the curriculum for schools, I would have the study of this man as certainly should be studied in every history curriculum, certainly in Brighton Hove, if not nationally. Because he was a first-generation migrant. He was a sepoy soldier, and then moved with his officer, well, who, when he retired, moved to Ireland, and then Saki Dean converts and marries an Irish girl, and then comes to London. And in London he sets up the first, we think, it's always dangerous to use the word first, or one of the first curry houses. So if you like curry, you can thank him. It's called there's a plaque on the building now which is called the Hindustani Coffee House. And then he moves to Brighton in 1840 and establishes a shampoo vapour baths on the seafront. He wasn't a great businessman, but the baths were quite popular. But eventually there's competition, and he doesn't die a wealthy man, but his son established a chain of gyms in Brighton Hove, and his grandson became an internationally known physician, training at the Royal Sussex and then going to Guy's, discovering a means of measuring blood pressure. And to me, this family, at a time when he came to Britain, there were probably 10,000 people with black or Asian origins living in England at the time. And it should be, I mean, he should be studied in every school in Brighton Hove. He should be well known. There is a plaque to him, this is on the Queen's Hotel. He's buried in St Nicholas's churchyard. And I think migration is such an important topic today that it ought to be taught in all schools. There is a course at GCSE level on migration, which looks at the history of migration, not just in this country, but all over the world, and how we're all interlinked. So that's Aberdeen Mohammed. Parnell. John Stuart Parnell in the 1880s was the leader of the Irish Home League and also the Parliamentary Party in the House of Commons, which with 80-odd seats held the balance of power. And he made governments. And Gladstone had been persuaded of the need to introduce Irish Home Rule, which would have happened had it not been for an affair he was having in Hove with a lady called Catherine O'Shea. And he was living with Catherine in, first of all, Medina Terrace, and then Walsingham Terrace. And it was whilst they were living in Walsingham Terrace that the affair became publicly known. Prior to that time, Catherine's husband, Captain O'Shea, had been taking bribes from Catherine's aunt to keep quiet. When she died and the money was no longer forthcoming, Captain O'Shea went public, and that destroyed his reputation, and that destroyed any possibility of Irish Home Rule being introduced by Gladstone. All happened in Hove. So you could start, studying that plaque would lead you into a study of Irish Home Rule and Irish politics at the end of the 19th century. And also a study of Parnell. I mean, they got divorced eventually, and just like today in many ways, the press were camped outside of his house in Walsingham Terrace, waiting for the time that he and Catherine would they had to go to Spain to get married. That was a local registry office, and the press were camped outside the house. And to avoid the press, he got up early one morning, didn't tell his groom that he was leaving, and they drove themselves to the registry office at Steny, and on the way back, they came across the press, who eventually found out. So a study of that plaque can lead you all over the place, and certainly into Irish politics, and the whole history of Ireland would be different had it not been for this affair. Lieutenant Jacqueline Nealon. This plaque is in Westhill Place. Jacqueline was brought up with her sister Eileen in Westhill Place. It was her 7 years of her life in the late 20s and early 1930s. And then the family went to France, and so she became fluent in French. And at the outbreak of war, she returned back to England. And then she applied to join the ATS, but was turned down because she wanted to drive in the ATS, because she'd never driven on the left-hand side. They said, no, we can't take you. So instead, she joins the SOE, Special Operations Executive. And in early 1943, was sent into France with a colleague and spent 14 months underground in central France, setting up a new network of spies, communicating back with England, involving herself in sabotage and espionage, and for 14 months, a hugely long time, they say, sort of someone in SOE. Eventually, she was persuaded to return only because her sister Eileen had been sent out, and it was policy not to have two members of the same family operating in France at the same time, so she came back. Her colleague that had gone out with her 14 months previously was soon captured. Her sister was captured and was sent to a concentration camp, survived, but scarred for life, mentally and physically. So that's a blue plaque for a lady, and of immense bravery and courage. And again, this is a blue plaque to someone who, I mean, the past was very, very different, and the way people led their lives was very different to today. This is John Hindmarsh. His father had been press ganged into the Navy, i.e. forced to join the Navy, and he joined the Navy at the age of 7, following his father onto his father's ship. And then at 13, during the Battle of the Nile, 1898 I think it was, involved in a battle with the French just off the Nile. And the neighbouring French ship was under fire, had been set alight and was getting close to his ship. The officers on his ship had all been killed by a broadside attack on the quarterdeck. And he at 13 gathered round a group of men to cut all the ropes and the anchors which were holding the ship in one place, so that the ship could actually sail away at 13. And he lost an eye during that engagement. Subsequently, Nelson heard about it, and he was promoted to be a lieutenant. And he had a distinguished career in the Navy. And then in the 1830s, he was appointed Governor of Australia, the first Governor of Australia, of South Australia, which was being settled at that time in the 1830s. He fell out with the settlers over the choice of main capital for South Australia. They wanted Adelaide, he wanted somewhere else, so he was recalled and then sent off to Heligoland as Governor of Heligoland. And eventually retires in 1857, and he retires to Albany Villas in Hove. Albany Villas, recently built as part of the Cliftonville estate, and lived there for 3 years. So, an interesting study really into the importance of the Navy in those days, but also going into the Navy at the age of 7, how life was different. Okay. So, you move house, you discover that someone famous was living in your house, and you want a blue plaque. What do you do? And I've listed here what you do and the criteria which have to be met. First of all, you would contact the chair of the panel, and you do that via Visit Brighton. The blue plaque panel operates under Visit Brighton, and all the information about the panel is on the Visit Brighton website. So you contact the chair of the panel, and he will first of all ask you what's the connection between your house and this person. Is it a strong connection? And a strong connection means 5 years, really. 5 years continual residency. And then you'll go away and do some research and try and establish the proof of residency. And then if you think it fits that criteria, you'll come back and then you'll look at the other main criteria, which I put on the right-hand side. The person should have made a significant contribution to human welfare. So, and regarded as such by his or her peers. And that really means a contribution which has brought about important change to an improvement in society in whatever field that person is working in. There should be a strong link between the person and the property, which should be 5 years, continual residency, or born or died. The building should be contemporary with that person, i.e. should be the building that existed at that time. So where you see, and you will see, a plaque near here or on this site, that's unusual to happen, but it does happen, and it's likely to have happened on a plaque which was produced before criteria were introduced. Criteria were introduced to Brighton in 2006, to London in 1954. So, been dead 20 years, and you will find plaques, which have been commissioned by Brighton and Hove for people who have not been dead for 20 years. For example, Anita Roddick was given a plaque within a year of her death. That's very, very unusual. Because you don't know what skeletons are there. And there has to be a period of assessment, historical assessment, before someone is given a plaque. Not commemorated elsewhere by a plaque, and of course there are loads of examples, particularly people like Dickens and Churchill of other plaques, but as a general rule, should not be commemorated elsewhere by a plaque. So you go through the criteria and you reckon, yep, my candidate fits those criteria. You would then fill in a nomination form and then send it to the panel, and then you would be invited to attend a panel meeting and put your case. And then the panel would discuss your case and would approve or not approve accordingly. So in conclusion, when I think of the values of plaques in studying the past, they foster a sense of pride in the neighbourhood. People want plaques. You know, there is a myth that plaques contribute to an increase in the value of your house. Not so. But they certainly can help in planning. If your plaque is on a building which has been under threat of demolition, plaques have saved buildings from demolition, because the plaque is really an indicator of the house being important historically. Accessible to all, anyone can see a plaque in their locality, and you know, if you're studying local history, if you want to study your area, you start with the local plaques. And plaques can provide a context for a broader historical inquiry. I've mentioned Ireland, for example. And plaques look away from the elites and focus on the stories of local people in a more banal, but really an intimate way. So, there we are. Thank you very much for listening. Questions, otherwise I shall be around.
Thank you very much, great talk. I've got two questions. What's the most interesting plaque that is currently in Brighton Hove you would advise to visit? And the second one is, has there ever been an occasion when you needed to remove a plaque?
No, I mean plaques. I think one thing we need to remember that there are 161 plaques in Brighton and Hove, and they represent the views of people throughout that period of time. I mean, there might be people, for example, who take objection to the fact there are 9 gilt plaques. So I can't think of an example where a plaque has been removed.
Codrington was removed from Western Road.
Sorry, yes, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
the owners took it
That's
off
right.
because they were fearing
Yeah.
Colston.
Yeah,
line.
Codrington was removed, but that wasn't officially done. No. I mean, the council, I think, I know, had a hand in that happening, but that was removed. Yeah, so that's the only one. Yeah,
That's great, thank you.
and the most interesting plaque. Well, that's difficult. I mean, I like Parnell. I like the stories behind the plaques. You know, where there is a human interest story. So the Parnell one I like. I mean, we've got a couple coming up. We've got this one coming up, which is interesting. And in fact, all the ones which are coming up, we've got that one coming up. Dare I mention we've got a plaque to Ellen Nychart coming up on the Theatre Royal. They'll be interesting. We've got one to William Constable, the first person to conduct daguerreotype photography in Sussex. So, another one, and I think this is an interesting one as well, because it's working class. and it's a plaque to the so-called Battle of Lewis Road, which took place during the general strike, and was the occasion for a large crowd, 4,000 people gathering outside the tram building in Lewis Road to stop the trams coming out. And the police intervened with several hundred police, plus mounted specials on horses. And there was a struggle, a number were injured. And I think that's an interesting one because, I mean, plaques, for me, plaques are important because they draw attention to hidden history. And I can point to a number of these, and they do highlight the role that individuals have played. And that one, I don't think the general strike is really studied at all. I mean, it was important from various points of view. It was a strike, the only strike, general strike we've had. It showed the ability of the unions to get workers out. But ultimately it failed, because after 9 days, the TUC said, no, we can't go on anymore, and the miners were left to themselves. So I like that one, although it's coming out in May, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that one you have in the Brighton Albion is actually now there's a round one, isn't it?
No, that's,
On the 7 star, it's a round
Yeah.
one nowadays.
the one that's on the, you're thinking of the one which is,
On the 7 star.
yeah, that's an illegal one.
The 7 star?
Yeah, that's an illegal one.
Oh,
It's a listed building. It is illegal to put anything onto a listed building, and a fan group has put what you see now onto that building, and they could be liable for a criminal offence, but that is being replaced by that one, which has been agreed by the panel and has gone through and is being organised for the unveiling will take place on the 24th of June this year, so to the day after the formation of the Albion, and that's a nice one, really. We go with, sorry?
The location of it.
Oh, Ship Street.
Ship Street.
Yeah. I mean, what you will find, a lot of the early plaques are, and the reason I think it's important to keep them and not replace them, is that they show what was important for society at that time. And a lot of the Hope plaques were plaques for literary figures. Very few for sport or cultural. So we're beginning to get, and that's one of them, we're beginning to get plaques for other areas. Yeah.
Are you aware of one on a house in Hanover that clearly doesn't meet your first criteria of contributing to human well-being? Everyone who has lived here since 1866 has been a remarkable, ordinary person.
Well, of course, anyone can put a plaque in a house. And it can say whatever it likes. I mean, there was a plaque in the lanes for someone who had eaten in a restaurant regularly. So, what I've been talking about really are the official plaques that have been authorised by the panel. So, for a plaque to have City of Brighton and Hove, which is almost a hallmark of quality that this person did something significant,